"Don't speak," the whisper hissed through the steel bars. Officer Ava Ramirez froze, her hand instinctively tightening on her sidearm. She was a decorated officer facing a man sentenced to life, but the raw terror in his eyes wasn't a game. Elias Vance, a 30-year-old inmate she knew only as quiet and withdrawn, was now her only lifeline. He was revealing a deadly ambush set just for her down the corridor. Until he told her what they were carrying, she thought she knew how to handle any threat. Before I tell you who those men were and what their real plan was, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. Midnight at Red Rock Correctional Facility was a symphony of humming fluorescent lights and the oppressive weight of concrete, a silence waiting to be shattered. Officer Ava Ramirez walked the D-block corridor with a practiced, steady pace that belied the unease crawling up her spine. For 8 years, she had learned the rhythms of this place, the symphony of snores, coughs, and restless whispers that filled the night. But tonight was different. Tonight was silent. It was an unnatural, predatory quiet, as if the entire block was holding its collective breath. Her boots made soft, rhythmic taps on the polished concrete, a solitary sound in a sea of anticipation. Her route was muscle memory, a path walked 1,000 times before, but every shadow seemed to flicker with newfound menace. She paused at cell 47. Inside, Elias Vance sat bolt upright on his cot, not sleeping, but waiting, his wide, soul-searching eyes locked onto hers, a scar on his temple standing out starkly against his pale skin. He was serving life for a botched heist, a good man who'd made one catastrophic mistake. In all her years, he'd never been a problem. He read, he kept to himself, he was invisible. Tonight, he was the only thing that was real. He beckoned her closer, his face slick with sweat. "Don't speak," he whispered again, his voice urgent and raspy. "Just listen." Ava's training screamed at her. Maintain distance, show no weakness, never let an inmate dictate the terms. But the sheer panic in his voice bypassed protocol. It wasn't manipulation, it was a desperate plea. "There's an ambush," he breathed, the words tumbling out. "At the end of the hall by the checkpoint. 3 of them. They're waiting for you." Ava's heart hammered against her ribs. She glanced down the long, empty corridor. It looked the same as always. "Oh," she mouthed, barely making a sound. "Rico Diaz, the ghost Petrov, and their leader, Kane," Eli said, naming 3 of the block's most dangerous residents. "Diaz has a shard of sharpened plexiglass from a light fixture. Petrov has a weighted sock filled with D-cell batteries. But Kane, he's got the master key." The words hit Ava like a physical blow. A master key meant this wasn't just an assault. It was the start of a full-blown riot. "Why are you telling me this?" she whispered back, the question hanging heavy in the stale air. Eli's gaze was unwavering. "Because they're doing it for revenge. Your brother, Detective Ramirez, the drug ring he took down last month, that was Rico's family. This is payback." The conspiracy deepened, weaving a chilling web that extended beyond the prison walls and into her own life. "And they didn't get that key by accident," Eli added, his voice dropping even lower. "Sergeant Miller, he's been selling copies for months. He's in on it. Corruption, betrayal from one of her own." The foundation of her world tilted on its axis. The silence of the block suddenly made perfect, terrifying sense. They weren't sleeping. They were waiting for the show. Her radio crackled on her shoulder, a jarring burst of static. "Unit 12 to dispatch. All clear on C block." The dispatcher's voice followed. "Dispatch to Unit 7. Status report, Officer Ramirez." She had 30 seconds to respond. 30 seconds to choose between protocol and the word of a convicted felon. Calling for backup could trigger the attack prematurely. Staying silent would send a patrol, potentially walking them into the same trap. She looked at Eli, seeing not an inmate, but a man risking execution by his peers to save her. She made her choice. Keying her radio, she forced her voice into a calm, steady tone. "Unit 7 to dispatch. All clear on D block. Just checking a flickering light panel. Everything's code 4. Copy that, Unit 7." Report back in 15 minutes. She had 15 minutes to survive. The 15-minute clock was a ticking bomb in Ava's head. Every second that dripped away brought her closer to another radio check-in she couldn't fake. She pressed herself against the cold bars of Eli's cell to steal a stark reminder of the cage she was in. "Is there another way out?" she whispered, her mind frantically searching for an alternative to the death trap waiting at the checkpoint. Something they wouldn't expect? Eli's eyes, accustomed to the dim light and the constant search for angles, darted down the hall behind her. "The ventilation grate," he said, a spark of hope in his voice. "Behind the old laundry bins near cell 19. It leads to the main utility tunnel. You can get to B block from there. It's a tight squeeze, but it's your only shot." Hope was a dangerous thing in Red Rock, but it was all she had. The laundry bins were 20 yards away, in the opposite direction of the ambush. It was a chance. "But be careful," Eli warned, his face grim. "Cell 19 is Spider Martinez. He's one of Rico's crew. He'll be watching." Ava gave Eli a final, grateful nod and melted back into the shadows. She moved with a practiced silence, her body low, her senses on fire. The corridor felt a mile long. Each step was a gamble. The laundry bins came into view, a stack of gray, plastic tubs that offered the only cover in the stark hallway. 10 more feet. 5. She was almost there when a soft, conversational voice slithered out from cell 19. "Long night, Officer Ramirez?" Ava froze, her blood turning to ice. Spider Martinez was awake. He was at his cell door, his silhouette a dark, menacing shape against the small window. He couldn't see her clearly in the shadows, but he knew she was there. "Just making my rounds, Martinez," she replied, her voice a low, steady instrument she prayed wouldn't betray her fear. "Go back to sleep." "Oh, I can't sleep," Spider chuckled, a dry, scraping sound. "Got a feeling tonight's gonna be interesting. A real game changer." He was toying with her, drawing it out. He knew. Ava took a slow, deliberate step towards the bins, trying to appear casual. Her hand brushed against the cool metal of her multi-tool clipped to her belt. She could see the square outline of the ventilation grate, held in place by 4 screws. Just a few more feet. Suddenly, a crackle of static erupted from a radio on her shoulder, a sound as loud as a gunshot in the dead quiet. She lunged to turn the volume down, but it was too late. Spider went silent. The playful menace in his voice vanished, replaced by a cold, certain hostility. Then she heard it, the sound that shattered her last hope of stealth. A soft metallic click, the unmistakable sound of a cell door being unlocked. Spider had a key. All pretense of caution evaporated. Ava lunged for the laundry bins, diving behind them just as Spider's cell door swung open with a low groan. "She's here. By the laundry," he roared, his voice echoing through the block. Footsteps erupted from the far end of the hall. Diaz, Petrov, and Kane were coming. The hunt was on. Her hands shook violently as she fumbled for her multi-tool. The first screw was tight, groaning in protest. Footsteps pounded closer, a deadly drumbeat counting down her final seconds. The first screw came free, clattering softly to the floor. The second was rusted. She put all her weight into it, her muscles screaming. "Nowhere to run, officer!" Rico Diaz's voice taunted from the darkness. The second screw gave way. She scrambled to the third, sweat stinging her eyes. She could hear them spreading out, flanking her. The third screw popped free. Just one more. Her tool slipped on the fourth, gashing her knuckle. She ignored the pain, driven by pure adrenaline. The metal screeched as the final screw turned. The grate came loose in her hands, and she threw it aside, revealing a black, suffocating void. The ventilation shaft was a cold, metallic throat threatening to swallow her whole. Ava scrambled inside, the rough edges of the opening snagging on her uniform and scraping her skin. Behind her, the corridor erupted in angry shouts as Kane and his crew realized where she had gone. The darkness inside the tunnel was absolute, a suffocating blackness that smelled of dust and rust. She pulled the grate back into place, plunging herself into total isolation. She was blind, crawling on her hands and knees over bolts and rivets that dug into her flesh. Her only guide was the faint current of air that promised an exit somewhere in the suffocating dark. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs, a drumbeat of survival. She had done it. She had escaped. All she had to do was keep crawling, find an exit to B block, and radio for an army of backup. They would storm D block, and this nightmare would be over. Eli would be safe. She would be safe. Then, muffled voices seeped through the metal walls of the shaft. They were standing right below her. "She's gone," Rico Diaz spat, his voice tight with fury. "The tunnel leads to B block. We'll never catch her." There was a moment of silence, and then Kane's voice, calm and chillingly pragmatic, cut through the air. She didn't figure this out on her own. Someone talked. Another pause. "We know who. Forget her for now. She can't go anywhere. Let's go pay a visit to our friend in cell 47. He needs to learn what happens to rats." The words hit Ava with the force of a physical impact, stopping her dead in her tracks. Let's go pay a visit to Elias Vance. They were going to kill him. They were going to kill the one man who had risked everything for her. Her escape was his death sentence. An image of Eli's terrified, earnest face flashed in her mind. He wasn't just an inmate. He was a human being who had chosen to do the right thing at the ultimate personal cost. He had saved her life. Her entire being screamed at her to keep moving, to crawl towards safety, towards the light. It was the logical thing to do, the trained response. Survive. Get back up. But her conscience was a heavier weight than the darkness pressing in around her. What good was her survival if it was bought with the blood of an innocent man? She remembered a small moment from months ago. She'd been walking her rounds, lost in thought, and almost slipped on a wet patch on the floor. Eli had quietly cleared his throat from his cell. "Careful, officer," he'd said. "Floor's slick there." It was a tiny gesture, a moment of simple, human decency in a place that was designed to stamp it out. He saw her not just as a uniform, but as a person. Now, she had to do the same for him. The choice was agonizing, a war waged in the silent darkness of the tunnel. To go forward was to live. To go back was to face three armed, desperate men, with the odds stacked impossibly against her. It was suicide. But to abandon Eli was a different kind of death, a moral death she knew she couldn't live with. Taking a ragged breath that tasted of dust and resolve, Ava Ramirez made her choice. She wasn't a survivor abandoning a fallen comrade. She was an officer, and her duty was to protect, even if the person she was protecting was a prisoner, even if it cost her everything. Slowly, deliberately, she began to crawl backward, back toward the sounds of her hunters, back toward the heart of the storm. Emerging from the ventilation shaft was like being reborn into a nightmare. Ava pushed the grate open with agonizing slowness, the metal scraping softly against the concrete. The corridor was bathed in the same sickly yellow glow of the emergency lights, but the atmosphere had changed. The hunters were no longer hunting her. She peered around the edge of the laundry bins and saw them. Kane and Spider Martinez, moving with a cold, predatory purpose down the hall. They were just 2 cells away from Eli's. Kane held the sharpened plexiglass shiv, its edge glinting. They were moments away from murder. Ava knew she couldn't take them both in a direct assault. They were ready for a fight, and she was out of position. A shootout would be chaotic, and Eli could be caught in the crossfire. Her mind, sharpened by adrenaline, raced through the facility's emergency protocols. There was only one option that didn't involve firing a shot. One option that changed the rules of the game entirely. She holstered her weapon. Then, she broke from cover and sprinted. Not at them, but away from them towards the security checkpoint at the end of the hall. Her boots pounded on the floor, the sound echoing like thunder. "It's her!" Spider yelled, whirling around in surprise. "Forget the rat, get her!" They gave chase, but they were too late. Ava reached the wall, and her hand slammed down on the red, lever-activated fire alarm. The effect was instantaneous and overwhelming. A deafening klaxon began to shriek, and strobing red lights painted the corridor in hellish, pulsating flashes. With a series of thunderous, echoing clangs. Heavy steel doors slammed shut at both ends of the corridor. Cell doors automatically deadbolt. She had locked them in. She had locked herself in with them. The wail of the alarm made conversation impossible, but in the strobing red chaos, Ava saw Kane's expression shift. He stopped running, a slow, chilling smile spreading across his face. He understood. She hadn't called for help. She had initiated an internal lockdown. No one was getting in, and no one was getting out. She had trapped them in a steel cage, and she was in it with them. Kane gestured for Spider to spread out, and they began to advance on her slowly, using the disorienting flashes of light to mask their movements. Ava drew her sidearm, her back pressed against the cold steel of a sealed door, the flashing lights making it impossible to hold a steady aim. "Big mistake, officer." Kane's voice boomed over the alarm. "You just sealed your own coffin." But Ava had one more card to play, a weapon more powerful than any gun or shiv in a place like this. Paranoia. "You think this was about Eli?" she yelled back, her voice raw. "He wasn't the only one who's tired of you, Kane. Why do you think everyone else stayed so quiet tonight? They're tired of you running this block, taking their commissary, threatening their families." Spider hesitated, glancing at Kane. "She's lying. She's trying to mess with our heads." "Am I?" Ava pressed, her eyes locked on Spider. "Ask yourself, Spider." Kane had the master key. He could have been out of here weeks ago. Why wait? Why orchestrate this whole elaborate riot? Maybe it wasn't about escape for all of you. Maybe it was just about tying up loose ends for him. You're just a pawn he's willing to sacrifice. "Shut up." Kane roared, but the seed was planted. In the intense, paranoid world of prison, trust was a fragile commodity. Kane's elaborate plan suddenly looked less like a brotherhood and more like a dictatorship with a single survivor. "He's the one with the corrupt guard on his payroll," Ava shouted, her words cutting through the noise. "He's the one connected to the cartel. When this is over, who do you think is going to get the deal? You or him?" In the strobing red light, she saw the shift. The doubt in Spider's eyes curdled into fear, then rage. He looked from Ava to Kane, who was now glaring at him with pure venom. The alliance, built on fear and greed, shattered in an instant. Just as the sound of grinding gears signaled that backup was manually overriding the lockdown doors, Spider made his move. He didn't lunge at Ava. He lunged at Kane. This story shows that the brightest light of human decency can ignite in the darkest, most hopeless of places. The trust forged between a dedicated officer and a condemned inmate in a moment of life or death crisis transcended the steel bars and uniforms that were supposed to divide them. It proves that character is not defined by the mistakes of our past, but by the choices we make when everything is on the line. Have you ever misjudged someone based on their past or their appearance, only to be proven wrong? What would you have done if you were in Officer Ramirez's shoes, trapped in that tunnel with a choice between your life and someone else's? Do you believe that everyone, regardless of their circumstances, has the capacity for one great, redemptive act that can redefine who they are? If this story about trust and redemption in the face of impossible odds moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories about everyday heroes. Share this with a friend who believes in second chances. We cherish and read every single one of your comments. More stories about surviving against the odds are waiting for you right now on your screen. Watch those next, and we'll see you tomorrow with a harrowing new story about the terrifying experience of an undercover cop who got in too deep.